think I'm going to speak for 3 minutes.
Right, 1 or 2 announcements to begin with. The usual thing, first of all, please make sure you've got your phone switched off. Then, if you are going to speak, we've had some discussion as to whether it's better if people stand or sit. The important thing is that you use the mic so that you can be heard. And if that's better standing up, fine. If it's better sitting down, then do that. Craig.
Lord Mayor, can I just say my microphone is still...
Councillor Simmons, let's be very formal, right. Okay. Then we should start with recognising that former Lord Mayor Pat Stannard died recently and the funeral was this morning. And asking people to make a few tributes. I know Councillor Brown and Councillor Simmons, and I will say a few words on behalf of the Lib Dems. Then we will have a minute's silence once we have had the tributes. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, a number of us were at Pat's funeral this morning, and it was a good opportunity to remember a colleague that I have very fond memories of. He was a councillor for 18 years, and I think it was in his last year as a councillor that he was Lord Mayor from 2003 to 4. He was a councillor both for the old East Ward and also for Blackbird Leys. In his time on council, he chaired the Estates Committee, and he was also Vice Chair of Public Affairs. And he was a really lovely man. He was always very friendly, and he was always... he always had a smile on his face, and there's a lovely picture of him as Lord Mayor on the front of the address at the crematorium, and it was a very typical picture of Pat smiling away, and that is how I will remember him, and I'm sure many people in this chamber who knew Pat will also remember him. Someone who was always kind, who had a great belief in public service, and gave much of his life to public service. After he retired from this chamber, he continued as a parish councillor in Blackbird Leys, and was still a serving member of that body up until the point of his death. So, yes, I'd like to sort of say how very sorry I was to hear about his death. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. It's a pleasure but a sadness to pay tribute to Pat. I was also at his funeral this morning, and I think his life was very well summed up by the people that made contributions to that service. I first knew Pat about 40 years ago, actually, not through politics at all, but because we lived opposite each other in Argyle Street in East Oxford, and we both had families of small children. So we got to know each other that way, and babysat and had teas and together and all those sorts of things. I became a councillor in '86, and Pat actually decided he was going to, this is typical of the man, he decided he was going to wait, which I didn't do, until his children were a bit older, and he felt that it was appropriate for him to have some time to spend not, concentrating on the family. He was an extraordinarily kind man. We heard lots of examples today of practical help that he gave to people living in the ward that he represented. And he was above all a devoted family man, and for him that was the absolute main driving force. Now, when you go to a funeral, even though you think you know somebody quite well, you discover new things about them. And what I discovered was that Pat had a passion for Alfa Romeos. Now, when I knew Pat, you know, he had the comfort and safety of the family saloon. So I never saw him as this, you know, this guy buzzing around in this fancy car, no doubt impressing all the ladies and anybody else who might be impressed. It was a privilege and an honour to call Pat my friend. He made a huge contribution to this council. He made a huge contribution to his communities that he served. We owe him a huge debt, and he will be missed. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons?
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. Much of what's been said of course, was very true and accurate to the man. I mean, I knew Pat from Eastbourne days when he was representing Eastbourne before he went to represent Blackbird Leys. And in fact, after that, he still sat on the East Oxford School as a governor. And it was perhaps the golden years of that school with a sort of range of really engaged governors, and he was very much a part of that. And as people have said, he was very sort of kind, very considerate, really responsive, very keen to hear the views, not just of residents and represent them very well, but also his political, you know, opponents. So I don't think saw us as opponents, he saw us as other fellow councillors in the area. And he was very keen to understand and even represented some of the views in council when we were unable to. So I think he's very, and I asked my wife, you know, former councillor Elise Benjamin, who spent a lot of time with Pat on the as a school governor, and she was hoping to make it to the funeral this morning, but unfortunately couldn't. And she said, she summed it up, I think, very nicely, saying he's very old school, and I think that really is something which is meant as a real term of endearment, because I think people did feel he was very much their friend, and I think he'll be sadly missed.
Thank you. Well, I should like to add for that, having known Pat when I was first on the council back in 1992, he was very welcoming and friendly to me as a new councillor, and it didn't matter what party you belonged to, as Craig has said. He felt, you know, we're all working together for the good of the people of Oxford. I remember him even saying that to me once, we're all working together. I was on the Environmental Health Committee at the time and the licensing panels, and we had to discuss whether or not people should be given a licence to make a bit of noise, have a bit of fun. And Pat said to me once, do you think these people have ever been young? It was doubtful in some cases, but he was, as has already been said, a great councillor, a lovely man, and it is sad that he has died. So thank everybody, and we'll stand for a minute's silence. Thank you. Right. And do we have apologies for absence? Jennifer?
Lord Mayor, we have apologies that I know of from councillors Fry, Hollingsworth and Gough, and apologies for lateness from councillors Goddard, Turner and Eiley Williamson. I don't know if there's any more from the floor.
Yes, Could I add in, please, apologies from Councillor McCongay, and Councillor Henwood will be late. Councillor Henwood was going to be late, but is clearly here now.
Thank you. Then any declarations of interest? No? Right, thank you. Then we have the minutes of council meetings. We're asked to approve the minutes as a correct record, starting with 29th of January, 14th of... Sorry, Councillor Brown.
Yes, just a small amendment on page 19 of the minutes. I think it is actually an accurate record of what I said. It says Councillor Brown thanked Councillor Price for his 12 years of service as leader. But strictly speaking, I believe that should be 10 years of service as leader of the council and 12 years of service as leader of the group. So I think that's correct, is it not, Bob? Sorry. I was just asking you if it was correct that you had done 10 years of service as leader of the council. Yes, yes. Thank you. So I think it probably, to accurately reflect reality, it should say 10 years of service as leader of the council.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. That's helpful. Comments on the 14th of February? No? Any on the 19th of February? No. Thank you. There are no appointments to committees, so we move on to announcements. Well, we know there are a number of people who are stepping down on May the 3rd, and I think it's a rather good tradition we have if those who are standing down would like to stand up so that we can thank them very properly and publicly. All right. Thank you. And I haven't thought about that. I have to see what's in the cupboard, Bob. Okay, thank you. Take you up on that offer. See you later. Yes. And those who are standing for re-election, obviously we wish them all the best. And we will see what the council is like on May the 4th. But, yeah. Now then, as you will know, I did remind people recently that there was a charity dinner this Friday, and a number of councillors are already coming, and there are still a few spaces. If there's anybody else who hasn't yet decided that they really could come and join us on Friday, we could still fit them in. But I trust it should be interesting, good, all the rest of it, raising a bit of money for the charities, and as I said to people, and I meant it, good company, so it would be nice to see anyone who's able to come. I'm going to Leiden to join in their memorial ceremonies, which they do on May the 4th, which means I'm not even around on polling day, which has caused a bit of grief to some of my colleagues. I hate to mention this, but, unfortunate. However, Bob, but we're having a sort of friendly time this evening, just remember that. But yes, it's they do rather a lot of ceremony, as previous Lord Mayors will know, but it is very good that we go to help commemorate with them the end of part of the war at least. They had a worse time, I think, than we had actually, and it's very important that we go. They come to our Remembrance Sunday in November, and so we go to theirs in May. Done one or two other things, been to a tea party at Care Home organised by the Rotary Club with a lot of people from Archway and other elderly people's groups. We had a lovely tea party. It was very, very good. Some of these people who were not able to get out very much at all, and the Rotary Club had organised a tea party out at Cumnor, which was a good party for everybody. More seriously, on Saturday, the 24th commemoration of the Rwandan genocide, which was utterly horrendous. We had a tribute, if you like, testimony from a survivor, and you're rather amazed that she had the courage to speak about it, and just how awful it was, and how positively they are putting this behind. Right, we are moving on, renew, get on with it, and very much wanted to contribute to life here in Oxford and to life in the rest of the country. There are a number of them scattered around the country in groups. And it was one of those occasions when you feel very humbled, actually, at what people have gone through and how they are coping, reconciliation with those who have given, well, behaved very badly is a rather small way of putting it, but I'm sure you know what I mean. It's amazing that they are able to move on, and they are, and it's an example to all of us that you speak out, don't let this happen again, no prejudice, etc. We know that, but it was very moving service, and there's an exhibition in the Pitt Rivers Museum, photographs of the Rwandan memorials, and again with some comments from people about how it had helped them to feel near to their siblings who had died and their parents. I recommend that if anyone could get down there. Then, different note, visit to East Oxford Primary School to tell them what Lord Mayors did or didn't do, and they wanted to know what I was paid and how old I was. Well, I ducked both of those, I'm afraid. but it was a nice opportunity to meet a lot of children who were curious, and very curious about the Lord Mayor's car. I assure you, that was a big success. And we had a boy trying on the robes. That was great. Now, moving on. No public addresses and questions now, but we move on to item 7, which is the Highway Maintenance Agreement. Oh, really, Sheriff, did you wish to say something?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Only since last council we had the admission of one freeman and number of the apprentices, so it was very well attended service. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm being reminded by Christine, in case you hadn't been aware that Kate has given birth to her 3rd child, and it is another son, and maybe we should send good wishes on behalf of the City of Oxford, since it's a very apposite moment. But that's a bit of news that possibly hasn't reached you, but just to lighten the proceedings a little bit. Oh, there we go. Chief Executive. No. Leader, you have some things to say, I think.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a few items from me. Since our last meeting, I attended a Holocaust memorial service at the synagogue, where I also heard survival testimony read by the daughter of someone, both of whose parents had survived the Holocaust, which was an amazing and moving occasion. So I was very honoured to be a guest there on behalf of this council, and sent obviously the wishes of this council to everyone there. I would at this point, had we not had an item later on the agenda, have made a statement about the Windrush generation situation as it relates to this council, but as there is a public address on this topic, I will give my response in response to that motion, to that address. But I will just say that all councillors should have received a briefing note earlier today, and in fact I think a revised version has just come round, so people will be aware of that. And I just wanted to add a few words, Lord Mayor, if I may, to yours in terms of thanks to all of those very long-standing and perhaps not quite so long-standing councillors who are standing down today. Obviously, yourself, Lord Mayor, Bob as our former leader, Jill Sanders, and Mohammed Abbasi, all either current or former Lord Mayors, and have many years' service to this council. I think it is a tremendous tribute to all of you. We would want to make a tremendous tribute to all of you. There are also a number of people, I believe, Farida, Ruthie, Mark, Michelle and Liz, who have perhaps not been here for quite so long, but all of whose contributions I'm sure are really welcomed by everybody on the council. And Michelle, I know that we came onto council at the same time as each other 5 years ago, so I'm particularly sorry to see you leave, and I hope you'll come back again. And Mark, we will miss your contributions on the living wage, and I know that I've said it to you many times, but I think that the work that you've done on that will remain a massive tribute to you, and we will carry it on. So we will continue to push for more organisations to adopt it. Jill, I just wanted to say something specifically to you, because when I first came on council, you were Chair of Highways and Traffic, you were leading on the Oxford Transport Strategy, and so much of what's happened in this city is a tribute to you and the work that you did over so many years. So thank you very much indeed on behalf of the council. Bob, it's hard to know where to start, but I will try and say a few words. 10 years as council leader, 12 years as group leader, 35 years on the council. It's been a transforming period as council leader. We are now a council which wins awards for excellent service. We're in a strong financial position. We've seen delivery of the Westgate, delivery of new structures to help us in the future, local housing company, Oxford Direct Services. We're building social housing, including 95, which are going to be allocated this year in Barton. I could go on, but I know the fact is that although in theory you're retiring, we're no doubt going to continue to see you regularly, both on the doorstep with us, but also as a trustee or board member for many of the local organisations which you have been so involved with over the years. And I would say we'll miss you, but actually I don't think we'll miss you because we're going to carry on seeing you, so which is very fortunate for us and for the city, that we will continue to benefit from your wisdom and generosity with your time. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of council to everybody who is standing down this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Chief Finance Officer, anything to say?
No, Lord Mayor, thank you.
Finances in good order?
Absolutely.
Excellent, that's good. Monitoring Officer?
No, Lord Mayor.
Everyone's behaving? Good? That's good. Then we move on to item 7 now, the Highway Maintenance Agreement. Councillor Brown.
I move the report.
A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Price. Any comments, questions? Councillor Simmons.
I just wanted to know why some of the appendices are confidential. I know we under Local Government Information Act, there are certain things confidential, but I'm not sure the basis on which.
An answer to that?
So I'm being informed that the reason is because they have estimates of our costs in them, so that's commercially confidential information.
Thank you.
Just sorry, through you, Chair. I can understand why they might have costs in, and I can understand that is a genuine reason for excluding them. But there's surely is other information in there, like I can see like condition of the roads, which I think should, you can split that out and make that available publicly.
I'm being told that we will be releasing all of that information as soon as the contract is signed, and I believe that we will. It's certainly our aim to release absolutely as much of the information as we possibly can.
Thank you. Councillor Gant.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I just had a question about paragraph 2.11, which is on page 46 of the agenda, just to do with the timescale for undertaking extensive repairs. It says here it's anticipated it will take 4 years, at least 4 years, to bring the network up to the required standard based on its current condition, which is slightly depressing, but not surprising. And assuming that funding levels are maintained and that further works don't arise, it seems to me that the recent cold weather suggests that further works are likely to arise. And is there any flexibility within this arrangement for revisiting the funding arrangements, rather than, as it says in the last sentence there, the anticipated timescale is likely to be extended? It's already at 4 years. Is there any flexibility to revisit the financial and works arrangement so that it doesn't take any longer?
So, I think that's a question that you really need to put through the County Council. We are taking on this contract on their diktat in terms of what they want us to do under the terms of the contract. We are simply carrying out their work. That is the proposal that is in front of us today. So whilst we as councillors will all be arguing, I'm quite sure, for more money to be spent on the roads in Oxford, and we can all see visibly the need for that to happen, and would like to see more money being spent much more quickly. I think that is an unlikely event at the moment, but we will continue to keep up the pressure to so do.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. Just 2 points. One is that because the contract is very complicated and there are lots of details, it won't now enter into operation until May the 21st. That's the new start date for the contract. But secondly, I'd like to point out that this is a result of all the work that's been done in cooperation with the County Council in a number of areas in recent times on transport. And one of the other dimensions to this is looking at potentially bringing our car parking arrangements together as well, because of the potential savings in costs and approach to the car parking arrangements all around the city. I mean, it's much further down the road than this is, but it's another further area of common discussion at the moment.
Thank you. I'd almost declare an interest and say that's something which personally I would look forward to very much. Councillor Tanner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm sure this authority, which after all has been looking after the minor roads for a very long time, will do a much better job than Skanska. There's not a lot to beat. But if there is one election issue, if I can raise the topic of the election.
Well, it's a little bit dodgy that, Councillor Tanner,
politics, Lord
at this
Mayor.
point.
If there's one issue that comes up on the doorstep again and again, it's the condition of the roads. The roads in this city and in this county and across the country are an absolute public disgrace. And let's be quite clear why they're in this mess. Certainly in the county, they're in the mess because the county council does not get enough money to pay for social services, and so they keep nicking it off the transport budget. That's the reality. And Lord Mayor?
I was wondering, do you wish us to complain to government? I mean, that's always an idea.
I wish to get rid of the government, Lord Mayor. But what we also know, I think, is that the county council does not help itself by allocating money for roads, not on use, or better still, the weight of the traffic. It allocates it on the length of the road, so that empty roads out in the countryside get as much attention as the Abingdon Road or the Botley Road or Headington or wherever else.
Can I suggest that actually goes to the county council, or do you want us to pass it on to the county?
No, Lord Mayor. What I want to do is to speak to the report, which is about our taking this over. It does seem to me that in our negotiations, we should be underlining the point that the allocation of funding is not a sensible one, and I do think that if and when we take over this contract, we will be in a stronger position to make that argument. And one more point I would like to make, if I may, and that is about cycling. We know that that Oxford is riddled with potholes, and they're getting worse. If you take your brand new car and drive it over a pothole, it might ruin the springs. If you are a cyclist and you go over a large pothole in the dark, or when it's been raining and you can't judge the nature of the pothole, you can come off your bike and you can be injured or worse. So I do hope, and I know cyclists use all parts of the road, but I do hope that the part of the road that is most often used by cyclists, the gutters, will be given particular attention, and that we will press for that in the contract too. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tanner. Councillor Simmons.
Yes, I wouldn't disagree with anything Councillor Tanner has said. Well, no, I would love to stop there. I think I'll continue. But I'd just like to add is that, I have found the county, when you report potholes, they do get fixed, not always as quickly as you'd like. I think the problem is proactive maintenance, and the bad, historically bad state of the roads is what causes the problem. It's like a proactive repair work, which is key. And I'd also mention something else which is relevant to this report, is the utility companies. They're absolutely appalling. I have far more problems getting utility companies to come and fix holes in the road that they've created through their bad, digging up bits, than the county, to be absolutely honest. It's not that the county should be doing a lot more because they're paid a lot more and it's their primary responsibility, but also the utility. So I hope that this taking over this contract will allow us to work more directly with the utility companies, because often we're fixing the mess that they create. And I think that's a cost-saving measure to make sure they do their maintenance and repair work properly, and don't leave things like, speed bumps that have nice brickwork on it, just as ugly bits of tarmac that just erode after a week. So I think it's also really important that, as part of this contract, we engage with the utility companies.
Thank you, Councillor Simmons.
I think a lot of very good points were made. The one thing I would like to specifically respond to was about the costs of the contract in terms of the road, the way the county measures the budget for roads, and just wanted to reassure John that at every opportunity we do raise that with the county. I mean, it clearly is, I think, completely unjustifiable that roads which get almost no use at all are given the same, effectively, amount of money in terms of repairs as roads like the Cowley Road, which have huge amounts of traffic going down them, including extremely heavy buses, and we all can see the results of that. So that is a point that we continue to regularly make to the county, but unfortunately, so far, that particular point has fallen on deaf ears. But nonetheless, we are pleased to be taking on the contract, and we are sure that our workforce will do an excellent job of maintaining the roads to the agreement with the county.
Thank you. All those in favour of accepting this recommendation on the money? Right.
That's everyone, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Now, the next item is the pay policy statement, which does, of course, affect the pay of the officers present in this chamber. And I just would like to ask whether members are content that the officers remain while it is discussed. Council in agreement? Yes. Thank you. Right. Then, Councillor Price, would you like to move the
Yes, Lord Mayor, we're required by law to produce an annual statement of our pay policy. This is the continuing nature of our policy. It doesn't change in any significant ways, but in moving it, I'd just like to point out two things which are, I think, worth reminding us about. Firstly is the fact that we have a new pay agreement, local pay agreement, which our colleagues in the trade unions and the officers negotiated from the 1st of April this year to 31st of March 2021. And that, I think, underlines, yet again, the very good relationship we have with our trade unions and the way in which they've contributed very successfully to the stability of this council's finances over the last 6 years. The other thing is that the detail of our pay equality statement, our gender equality statement, is attached to the report. There's no requirement for us to do that, but we thought it was a good place to publish it because it does provide then easy access for people to see the way in which we have met very successfully the requirements for gender equality in our pay policy.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for the pay policy, please? Councillor Brown, thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Simmons.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions. On pay multiple, I mean, we've previously talked as a council about setting some sort of target for pay multiples, which is paragraph 21, and we've not done so. But obviously we've stated it in this report, which is welcome. And indeed, it's relatively good compared with sort of Hutton Review recommendations. I'm just wondering whether the administration has a view on what is a good pay multiple to aim for, whether they're happy with that figure, which is 8 times salary, highest to lowest salary. And the second question is on the gender pay gap report, which again, it's welcome to see this published here. So there is a median gender bonus gap is 19.5%, and there is an explanation underneath, which I honestly can say I don't understand. It says that the pay gap is to do with the bonus, and I understand what the bonus is. I just don't understand how it seems to me that you know, the bonus payment is preferentially given to one gender and not the other, and I presume this is a two-gender report. And so I'm just wondering why that is, and I don't see in there an explanation for that.
Thank you. Any answers?
Yes, on the first point, Craig, we haven't actually considered any question about pay multiples and ideal figures. I think 8:1 is well below the national average, and from my vague recollection, I think it's the kind of figure that's been talked about more generally as being a kind of target, but we'll have to look at that in more detail. So far as the gender pay gap report is concerned, I'm sorry if it's not clear. What it's saying is that the median gender bonus gap derives from the fact that it's done on the basis of raw bonus payments. The bonus payments are linked to hours of work, and more female employees work part-time, so have fewer hours by which they get that payment. So the actual payments themselves are the same, but because there are fewer hours, then you end up with that gap. That's the reason for it. So it's a reflection of the probably inequality within the distribution of part-time work, which goes back to wider societal issues which we're aware of. Yeah, that's right.
Hmm. Thank you. Any more questions or comments? No? Right. Do you wish to do any summing up at all, Councillor Price? Thank you. Right. Those in favour of the recommendations?
That is also everyone.
Thank you, Jennifer. Right, then we have item 9, which Councillor Brown, I think, is going to put forward.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'm delighted to be able to move this report today, and I'd like to emphasise that this is very much a joint report from all three groups, and I believe Councillor Gant will second the report, moving of the report. It's important that whilst we thank all members who've served our city, we have a way to recognise exceptional service when we see it. I think it's very clear that we have some retiring members whose blushes I will save from mentioning specifically at this point, but whom we may wish to honour in this way. Individuals can only be recognised after they have retired as councillors, so effectively this is the enabling report that will allow us to confer such an honour on individuals in the next municipal year. I hope that all councillors will welcome this report and support it.
Thank you. Councillor Gant?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Susan and David for the collaborative approach on this. I'm delighted to be able to second this report, and just to reiterate what Susan said, that the key phrase in here is exceptional circumstances and exceptional service, and I'm very pleased that we're able to mark that in cases as yet unnamed.
Any comments on this scheme from anybody? No? Those in favour of following the recommendation to adopt the scheme? Actually, I'm abstaining, thank you. Right. Thank you. Right, then we move on to the Executive Board minutes. We start off with the 13th of February, starting at page 69. Any questions on those? Councillor Gant.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I have a question about paragraph 155, which is on page 74 of the main agenda, grant allocations to community and voluntary organisations. It's about the timing of the implementation of these decisions by the City Executive Board. Would I be right in thinking that there was a delay in implementing these grants, and what has been the effect, if that is the case, and has it now been resolved?
So my understanding of the current situation is that because we had a bit of a delay in the process this year in terms of the grants, because we wanted to spend a bit of time looking at the way we awarded grants and reviewing the policy, we suddenly found ourselves right at the end of the process coming up against PERDA. So we've not been able to release some of the decision making in relation to the grants at the moment because of PERDA. So we will, as soon as the elections are over, be able to let organisations know how they have been successful in terms of the grants awarding process. As far as I'm aware, there has been no adverse effect on organisations. For the most part, these are sort of one-off grants, which would, whilst nice to have, are not necessarily grants that people would be reliant upon. In terms of some of the commissioning of grants, I think that had already pretty much been decided and communicated to organisations. So it's much more the one-off grants that we're talking about.
Thank you. Any more questions? Right, let's move on to the 20th of March. Any questions on those minutes? No. Any questions on the 17th of April, which is in the briefing note? Right, thank you. So we have these questions on notice. By the way, I did tell you that we're expecting to break for tea at 6:30, roughly as usual. But if we have all these questions on notice and everybody has a supplementary and everybody has a 3-minute answer as well, it will take 5 hours, which means we'll be here till 1 in the morning. Now, you know, much as we all love each other, I feel we might be getting a little bit tired of each other's company by then. So I can only ask, please, that you only ask a supplementary if you feel you really must, that you keep it short as a question, and that the answers are equally short. And then we have a fighting chance of getting through before midnight. So we'll start and see how many we can get through before tea. If we can start with a question from Councillor Tanner. Sorry, just a moment. I've just got to find the right page in my papers. Page 13, thank you. Yeah, we have Councillor Brandt to Councillor Tanner. That's right. It's been put that way around. Councillor Brandt, do you have a supplementary? Thank you. Then we have Councillor Thomas.
No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Altaf Khan.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I have supplementary. Would the board member agree that the community relations or the harmonies between communities, it takes a long time to build? And talking about the grant process where there was no money given to the BME community in 16-17, I'm not sure many religious groups were funded. Will he take the agenda on a priority basis, any comments or the hate against the Jewish community and the Muslim community as a priority to deal with this issue?
Thank you. Councillor Hayes?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the question in that.
Well, perhaps, Councillor Altaf Khan, can you summarise quickly?
Can I repeat? The board member replied, praising from the grant process. Would he agreed with me that the grant process did not deal with the questions I'm asking, and would he take the anti-Semitism comments and the Muslim community's hate as a priority to deal as a community safety cabinet or the executive board member? Would he take this as a priority?
I'm very happy to confirm to the council that we don't accept any hate in the city, and that all of the work that we do as a council and through our grants programme is directed to stopping that. I'd also like to say that actually through the Oxford Safer Communities Partnership, we're in the process of securing around £10,000, which is specifically to tackle hate crime, and I'm sure that the councillors' concerns will be met under that programme.
Thank you. Councillor Gant?
This is my only one. I'm sorry, I turned into a rather long question. I'm sorry about that. But just one very specific one. It's about the adoption of the Joint Statutory Strategic Plan. It's a very specific question. Will this council and others actually vote on whether or not to accept the Joint Strategic Spatial Plan with a straightforward yes or no?
Thank you. Councillor Gant to Councillor Price. Councillor Gant to Councillor Price again. No? No? Nor the housing numbers. Councillor Wade to Councillor Price. Tourist levy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's just a quick question about this. It's actually becoming very urgent, mostly because of Airbnb in this city. And I wonder if the board member could look at progressing our relationships with other local authorities who are working on this at the present time to try and get a tourist levy. We're looking at Edinburgh, Westminster, Birmingham, Brighton, Camden, Cornwall. All of them are looking at it now, and I think we should be doing it with them. I don't think we can wait. Thank you.
Councillor Price?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I agree that it would be very good to have a tourist levy. We have actually, as I said before, I think, raised this with government before as part of our work around the housing and growth deal, and we're told very firmly that it was a new tax and therefore unacceptable to government. The LGA have taken this up on behalf of a number of authorities, including the ones that Liz has just mentioned, and had a similar response. So I'm certainly happy to ask my successor to formalise the links with the other authorities and to go back to the LGA in the way that I've myself done, but I don't think we're going to see any developments very soon.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, You have a supplementary? Westgate?
Yes, a supplementary, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much for the response. But it's not really answering the question. I do feel there's a genuine risk here to local business of the impact of the Westgate Centre. And will the portfolio holder accept that footfall is not the same as trade and turnover? And will he look again at doing a comprehensive survey of the impact that Westgate is having on local businesses, please?
Well, we can certainly seek to do that through the new town team, which is being formed as we speak. And the intention, certainly this autumn, is that the city centre strategy will be pulled together by a number of different officer groups working together with the traders in the city centre. I think it'll be a good time to do it, because it'll be roughly a year from when the Westgate opened, and some of the short-term leases that have actually been relet on a short-term basis will have been finalised with new tenants, so it's a good time to do it. So I think in the autumn that certainly will take place.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas to Councillor Sinclair.
Supplementary? Supplementary. Again, thank you for the answer. Our understanding that an application was made, so can we just look into this together to find out what's happened here? There's clearly some misunderstandings.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Councillor Simmons to Councillor Sinclair, again, on East Oxford.
No supplementary.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson to Councillor Turner, Rosehill. Thank you. Councillor Gant to Councillor Rowley. Thank you. And another one on the tower blocks.
No, just to say thank you, that's good news.
Thank you. 15, Councillor Wilkinson to Councillor Rowley on Barton Park.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I wondered if the board member can tell me whether he thinks there are any lessons we can learn from these delays in respect to the large numbers of houses that we're hoping to build under the housing and growth deal.
Thank you. We are, of course, constantly monitoring the process and seeing if there are any lessons we can learn. The major lessons that I've learned, to be honest, is one, we can't control the weather, and two, Brexit is very bad for the building trade. However, we will continue to monitor the process, and if there are any improvements that can be made in the way that the City Council and Oxford City Homes manages contracts and developments, then of course we will implement them.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas to Councillor Rowley on St Mungo's.
Yeah, supplementary. Thank you for the answer. Our understanding is that a specialist worker is no longer attending meetings with the council. So can we just look into this, because it's a slight discrepancy on our understandings of the situation?
Of course, yes, but the St Mungo's are commissioned to operate the generic contract. The council also funds other initiatives, such as the shelter in the city for people fleeing domestic violence, such as Oxford Friend and OSARC, which provide specific services to which people can be referred or which people can contact. I'm not certain that St Mungo's are the people with the greatest expertise, but we do fund and we do liaise very closely with the people who do have the correct expertise.
Thank you. Question 17, Councillor Thomas. No? Thank you. Question 18, Councillor Simmons on feedback on referrals.
Yes, I hope we will. Thank you for the response. I hope we will agree to look into this, because I think it's unacceptable that our duty to rough sleepers seems to be diminished because we can't have any idea about where they are and what's happened to them and whether the service delivered has been acceptable, except going and loitering around where they've been rough sleeping, which is not really an acceptable way to deliver, to act as a councillor, or an appropriate way to make sure that residents get the best service.
Thank you. We've forwarded your complaint about StreetLink to StreetLink, and we will make sure that they deal with it. Immediate welfare concerns, as we've always said, can be made to the police non-emergency number, or if there is an immediate concern about the health of the rough sleeper, I would encourage anyone who is concerned to dial 999 and make sure that that person gets medical attention immediately. I'm not sure that I agree that city councillors should have privileged access to these services. However, I agree that they should work efficiently for everyone, and we will be taking this forward to do our very best to make sure they do.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I think Councillor Rowley's responded to the wrong question.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I didn't have a supplementary on 17. I had a supplementary on 18, which was concerning follow-up when we've reported a problem, an issue with one of these services, or indeed the council's own team, whether it's StreetLink or Oxbot, that we just don't get anything other than an email back saying an intervention has happened. These people, and we do not know whether that's been successful, whether there's any follow-up, and we often end up, the thing recurs because we can't intervene at that point.
Thank you. It is indeed, however, the same response. Our aim is to make sure that these services operate efficiently and effectively for everyone, so as to get help to rough sleepers when and where they need it, and where we are alerted to any failing in the service, we will take immediate action.
Thank you. Councillor Wolfe, do you have a supplementary? Thank you. Councillor Thomas, on rolling winter accommodation. To Councillor Rowley.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. So I do have a supplementary question. When we had our full council, you gave an undertaking that you were going to either provide continuous rolling winter provision, or at least whenever the temperature dropped below zero, in contrast to this winter. The answer you've given here looks like you're rolling back or stepping back from that commitment. Will you be providing at least accommodation every night below zero, please?
Thank you. I announced, as Councillor Thomas is well aware, that we are hoping to work with the churches to expand the provision that they have offered, for which we are very grateful. I believe that there is scope to do this, and I believe that our resources are best concentrated on provision of this kind that is open every night, rather than attempting to run ragged to the people who provide severe weather emergency provision, though we have been able to expand that as well. So we will continue to work both with SWEP providers, with the churches, and within the City Conversation and the Homelessness Partnership, with anybody else, such as the university, such as other city centre stakeholders who might be able to offer premises that are suitable for the purpose of providing winter accommodation. And yes, our aim remains to ensure that we have at least the same amount, and hopefully a significantly larger amount of accommodation available all the time in the winter.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, question 21, additional homeless budget spend? No? Thank you. 22, Councillor Simmons, on housing company business plan.
No supplementary.
Thank you. Councillor Wolfe, empty buildings.
Yes, I do have a supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reply. This is another one of those which is about kind of feedback to councillors who are eyes and ears on the patch, and of course who can report an empty property online. Very unclear actually what the process is after that. I mean, if you're not able to answer off the cuff, then I understand that. But it's about what actually happens if there is an empty property which we think that the council might actually have an interest in purchasing for social housing. What actually happens when that is flagged up, and is there any way in which we can be kept informed and engaged in that process? Because otherwise I can see opportunities being lost.
Well, the first thing we will do is attempt to locate the landlord, contact the landlord, tell the landlord about the help that we can offer for them to bring their property back into use. Obviously, if there is no interest in that, then we look at we explore going down the legal route. Obviously, in some cases, we have gone to a compulsory purchase order. That's a long and expensive process. Our empty property officer is very, very good at her job, and I've always found her very responsive to emails and phone calls, so I'd encourage any councillor who's concerned about a particular empty property, thinks there might be an opportunity to get in touch with her, and I'm sure she'll provide all the feedback necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Wade, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. It's for Councillor Hollingsworth.
It will be answered hopefully by Councillor Brown.
It's about the Code of Conduct, which, according to the responses, under constant review, including whether an upper limit should be introduced. They're planning 150,000 dockless bikes in London. There are already 1,000 in Manchester. Paris and Lisbon have actually stopped dockless bikes. They've got rid of them. And it seems to me that we need an upper limit now, because it's a lot easier to put in that upper limit at this stage than wait until we have too many bikes in our streets. And I wonder if you could comment on that.
I'm going to ask Councillor Upton to...
Right. Thank you.
Hi. Yes, we've had discussions with all of the three companies that are still operating here. And it's very difficult to know exactly what a sensible upper limit is. So what we've agreed with them is that each time they want to expand by 100 bikes, they will come to us. They're asking us and the county council and the university, because obviously a lot of them end up on their bicycles. And if one of us has an objection to it, then we will call them in and have a conversation about not doing it. But for the moment, because it's so hard to say, what would be appropriate here? 2,000? 500, 18,000, we don't know. But if they start to be a real problem, then we will stop them. And so far, they have all been very good citizens and are trying to cooperate with us. So I think the situation is under control. Okay?
Thank you. Another question from Councillor Wade on dockless bikes. Councillor Upton, are you going to be doing that one also? 25? You don't have supplementary, fine. Thank you. But what about 26? Yes?
Data collected by private companies. There's quite a lot of stuff in the press about this at the moment, and there are concerns that this information, which is given freely by the users of the bikes, then goes to China, where the line between private and public information is rather more blurred than it is here. And I wonder what action can be taken to ensure, that people know that they're handing over their information to a possibly very insecure source when they give it for these bikes, and secondly, what the council are doing about it, because it's in the small print, and people quite reasonably don't read small print. So I think we have some responsibility to protect them. Can I have your view on that?
Yeah, I guess I think Councillor Hollingsworth's reply, or whoever gave the original reply to it, is probably, I can't add much to that. This is something that all commercial contracts that we enter into with anybody using apps on our phone does pretty much the same thing. I don't think the council can particularly intervene on this one. I quite agree that it could be something we could be concerned about. We've talked to all of the companies have assured me that, for example, as soon as you stop the hire of your bike, they're no longer communicating with your phone, for example. Yes, I think part of their business model is going to be commercialising this information, but this is the kind of information that people give freely all the time on apps. But I'm not quite sure what we could do to intervene more. We could, other than asking them to have something sort of on their front page saying, be aware that your information will be used. But I could talk, if you think that would be sensible, then I will ask them to do that. Okay.
Thank you. As Councillor Gough is not here, I think she can't have a supplementary, but thank Councillor Hollingsworth for his reply. Then we have one question from Councillor Gant on hotel room policy. Do you have a supplementary? No? Thank you. Councillor Wolfe on potholes. To Councillor Brown.
Yes, I do have a quick supplementary here. Now that direct services are actually, the point of the question really is that now that direct services are actually got the contract, or will have from May, to maintain, that suggests to me that the discretionary payments that as local councillors we have, which we can use on infrastructure, don't actually have to go necessarily through the county council, which means that we could theoretically, and this is what I want to clarify, deal directly with their own direct services and talk to them about jobs that we could help them do. And really it's clarification as to whether that is a route that is possible. Obviously if you go through the county it's a different sort of process.
Just quick consultation. I think we might have to get back to you on that one.
Thank you. Then Councillor Wade on stop coach layovers. Any supplementary? Thank you. Then we have from Councillor Azad to Councillor Smith, Cemetery Service Volunteers. Councillor Azad.
Supplementary, but
No.
I would like to thank you, board members and staff and council for sorting this burial for Muslim community. And we are very grateful because community has been struggling for a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Pressel, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. I wondered if Linda could tell us how likely do you think it is that this problem will have been sorted out by this coming winter?
Councillor Smith.
The work is scheduled to be done, I believe, in the next few months. It's slightly more complicated than it was first considered to be because the drainage issues which have been uncovered, but it still is perfectly feasible, and I certainly hope it will be done within the time scale that you've requested.
Thank you. Councillor Gant to Councillor Smith on the stadium. No, thank you. Councillor Goddard on 5 Mile Drive.
Yeah. The answer says that if the project in question is viable, we'll have it in place by, well, as I read it, after the current football season finishes. Does the board member share my disappointment at the slowness and, to be honest, the uncertainty of the process? It's not entirely clear what we're going to get, when we're going to get it, or whether it's going to happen at all.
Not at all. This is another example of the Lib Dems whinging about something that they should be really pleased about. So, I mean, it was a rather late in the day change to the budget where we agreed to put the money in for the pavilion, and you know we're still working with the club to get a pavilion in 5 Mile Drive, which the club are happy with. That's our first aim with regard to it. I mean, it's very possible that the pavilion will be suitable for community use on a small scale as well. So it's really important we get this right. So yeah, that's the scheme of investment in our play areas. It's an annual scheme, £100,000 each year which is spent. It's really good news that a huge chunk of this is coming to 5 Mile Drive. But you know, we just need to be sure that it doesn't conflict with what we're doing with the pavilion. So I mean,
are you on 35 or 36?
It's a nice problem to have.
We seem to have conflated two questions here, or two answers. Councillor Goddard, do you have any further supplementary on either of them?
Yes. Slightly more to the members' liking, possibly. Welcoming in particular, in your response to 36, the self-closing gate. It's good that the new play area or the revamped play area will be as secure as that implies. Just a request, whatever happens with the new build, if it is possible to try to ensure that the hard standing area is left free for recreational matters, that would be extremely nice. It's no more than a polite request.
No? Thank you. Yes? Answer yes, yeah? Yeah.
I didn't hear a question. I mean, I'll take that on board. Yeah, it'd be great if we can get the Muga ends in there as well, yes.
Thank you. Question 37, Councillor Brandt on concessionary rates. No, thank you. Councillor Gant on ICT. Thank you. Councillor Wade on the emergency fund.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
I was quite surprised by this figure, and I presume that many people in this chamber would have been surprised as well that such a small amount of the universal credit money has been used. I happen to have a resident in my ward who has £2,000 in debt at the moment for rent because of problems over universal credit, and she hasn't been aware of this fund. And I'm concerned to know whether it could be better advertised to people who need it.
It certainly is advertised to anyone who's in contact with the City Council, and the advice agencies are also all aware of it, and we have done quite a lot of publicity around it. I mean, I'll certainly invite Councillor Wade to inform her constituents about it, but clearly what we cannot do with council funds is pay people's debts. So, I mean, that may be the sort of perhaps misunderstanding here. So I think what we have done is make this sum of money available, and at the point at which we made it available, some of the things that in my response have subsequently been put in by central government were things that we were campaigning for at the time, so we welcome them, but you know, they were not in place at the time. That has slightly improved the situation for a few people in terms of the absolute emergency hardship. There are, of course, the discretionary housing payments, and those are also well used by people across the city, and we have completely spent up that money this year. So I think that we will continue to monitor how this fund is used and continue to make it available, because we anticipate that as universal credit is rolled out further across the city, we may well see further calls upon it. But there are limits to how it can be used by the city, and some of the same criteria that are used for discretionary housing payments have to be used for this.
Thank you. Councillor Gant on the Green Belt.
No, and in response to your strictures, Lord Mayor, no supplementaries through to question 46 either. So
Good.
if you wish to skip ahead, please feel free.
Thank you. We get up to question 47 from Councillor Altaf Khan to Councillor Brown on Town Hall hire by BME groups. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I have supplementary. Councillor Brown, I asked for percentage of usage by different groups, but your response is just saying it is a place for open for everybody. It would have been better if you could please provide a percentage numbers. There was a problem, that's why I put this question there, and I'm also very surprised to see your last paragraph where you are saying, I just attended a meeting which was organized by a councillor and Lord Mayor, which is not factually correct, but it would be good if you could please give me a percentage graph, because I clearly see there was a problem of booking a room to have a meeting. Thank you.
I'm not sure I entirely followed that question, but as I've said in my answer there, we don't categorise town hall bookings based on ethnicity. So I'm afraid it isn't possible to give him the answer that he wishes. But if he has experienced any difficulty or he's aware of any group who have experienced difficulties in booking a room, then please do let me know, because I'd be happy to look into it.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons on GDPR.
And no supplementary.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, Community Post Office.
Yes, supplementary, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the answer. Our understanding that the issue of putting a post office in the East Oxford Community Centre was raised on the 30th of January this year at a reference group meeting at which officers attended. Can you look again into why this hasn't been picked up from that meeting? It was almost 3 months ago, and it's probably, you know, a very viable option.
I'm happy to look into that.
Thank you. Question 50 on the private rented sector.
Yeah, one supplementary. The whole purpose of this question was really to understand why the administration is not picking up on the motion that we passed as a council over 2 years ago to look at intervening into the private rental sector, which is completely out of control. We have the highest rental rates anywhere outside London. Why do you drag your feet on the issue of intervention in the private rental market?
I'm struggling to understand exactly what intervention he thinks that we can make into the private rented market beyond that we already do, in terms of trying to ensure that we ourselves provide some support to people who are struggling to cope with the high rental prices, both through building social housing and also through our Home Choice scheme.
Thank you. Right, we have done amazingly well there. Thank you. We could perhaps take one or two more items before tea. Indeed, item 13, which is the outside organisation report from Councillor Hayes. Would you like to introduce that, Councillor Hayes?
In the interest of time, no, Lord Mayor.
Well, I'd rather like you to. It seems to me that people might want to hear something from you. Come on.
Oh, you are good to me, Jean. I think I should start by thanking all the partners that Oxford City Council work with so closely to maintain community safety in the city. As you'll see from the report, we've had some really active and intense engagements with all those partners, and in certain key areas we've actually been growing our engagement. There's not very much change between the priorities that we set for the last year and the priorities that we're setting for the subsequent year. The key change that I think I would make is that we've actually themed our priorities more clearly, and we're absorbing the streams of work that we've been working on in the last year into the priorities coming up more clearly. I especially want to draw attention to the work that the Council's been doing to tackle drugs. And that's taken two particular steps. The first is being very clear about the fact that we have organised groups who are coming into the city to exploit children and very vulnerable adults. And that as a City Council, we are not prepared to stand for that. As councillors, we're talking to our residents, listening very clearly that they're concerned about brazen drug dealing on their doorsteps. And as a result, we've committed two community police officers within a task force to tackling that. The second part that I think I want to pick up is actually how, if you commit funding as a City Council, you can help to leverage new money in from other partners. So by committing £70,000 at the budget for two community police officers, we've successfully leveraged £95,000 out of our partners to form part of the drugs task force. And in addition to that, we've also had the Thames Valley Police reallocate a police role specifically to that task force to tackle drug dealing.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Anybody? Yes.
Thank you very much. I think it's a wonderful report. I just got a slightly question to ask. Police doing a great job in the city on the drugs and child exploitation. Recently, they have a very successful outcome at the Crown Court, what we read in the newspaper. On the same time, equally, these child exploitation cases where the people have been found not guilty, somehow I don't understand the law. Maybe you can help now, or you can give us the written response later on. Still, their CRB is written, although they've been found not guilty by the trial in the court. So a couple of gentlemen have come to me. They went to college at Oxford. They will not be allowed to carry on with their education because what is written, although they were found not guilty. On the same time, the people who try to have different employments, nobody wants to employ them. So I don't understand, either once you get accused, taken to the court found you not guilty, or something written on CRB stops you carrying on with your normal life. So there's a question being asked around Oxford during, everyone appreciates his election time, why this is happening, which I don't have the answer. So I think you may be able to help.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. First of all, I'm glad that Saj has raised this. I know he's raised it previously, and I'm also glad that Saj is available to those people and that they felt able to go and talk to him about their problems. As he's just outlined very briefly and succinctly there, this is quite a complex issue. And if it's okay with him, I'd like to pick it up later because, as you will quite rightly expect, it involves quite a lot of discussion with the police and other partners.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would I would just like to say that my experience of being a local councillor with my councillor colleagues in my ward, working with the police, has been very, very positive indeed. And they are, you know, from the leadership down, they're absolutely determined to fight the blight that is now imposed on people through not just drug taking and drug dealing, but a whole raft of hideous antisocial behaviour that goes with that, including people defecating in the street, masturbating in the street, urinating in the street. I mean, a whole lot of really, really grim stuff where, you know, ordinary families are trying very hard to give their children, as, you know, we all do, the best possible start that they can in their lives. I think it's, you know, we cannot underestimate the seriousness of this problem. I was invited by our local police sergeant to go as a citizen observer on a drugs raid within my ward. The worst part about that was that I had to be at the police station at 6:30 in the morning. But it was the professionalism of the two sergeants that were involved, because there were two raids, and all of their officers, and the courage, because they didn't know what they were walking into, because they don't know, was absolutely fantastic. And I think, you know, I'm so glad that we've been able to fund these additional posts, and I really commend Tom on how he's taking this work forward, because it is so important, and it is ruining people's lives, and we all only get one chance.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Deputy Lord Mayor. I just want to say that I completely agree with what Christine has said there. The police do an absolutely fantastic job. I think it's also worth saying that if you get the chance of going as a citizen observer to any of those raids, you should absolutely take it up, because it's a fantastic way to step into the shoes of police officers who are often facing real danger and difficulty. And I really want to make a point here about how the police struggle day in, day out with quite a difficult situation. As a council, we're investing £70,000 because we're working out how we can best partner the police. And the police are facing real difficulty, because it's not just that they're seeing significant sums of money lopped off their budget. It isn't just that the city of Oxford is becoming increasingly so unaffordable that on their pay, police officers are finding it difficult to stay in the city and serve the community they care about. But it's also the fact that the police are now having to spend up some of their reserves simply to keep operational effectiveness at the same level. That the 2% precept rise is actually, in the words of the Police and Crime Commissioner, just going to keep things at exactly the same level, not improve things. And then very finally, that we've got Brexit barrelling down the tracks. And we know that because of Brexit, we're going to see inflationary pressures on the police budget, which are going to severely affect their capacity to pay and procure the right equipment. And the fact that the police turn up day in, day out to do fantastic work under all of those pressures is a real testament.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. We note the report, Councillor. Thank you. Then, Scrutiny Committee report, Councillor Gant. Would you like to introduce it?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. As the report says, this is the last report to Council of the municipal year, so I'd like to begin by thanking everybody who has taken part in the work of scrutiny during the past year. The members of the main committee, and indeed the chairs and members of the various panels, and all of those who have attended meetings to give us the benefit of their experience and expertise. I think we've seen certainly most, maybe not quite all, but certainly most members of the executive board and many senior officers often waiting back until well into the evening. And we've had some excellent discussions with a great deal of detail, and I'm very grateful to everybody for all the work that has gone into that. I think just a couple of things I would pick out from the report that's in front of you. The work of this council and the work of councils generally evolves and changes as time goes on, and certainly I'm very keen on behalf of the members of this council to make sure that scrutiny continues to play its full role in that. Two examples would be the rolling out of the council's companies, and Scrutiny has played its part in setting up a panel to look at the shareholder arrangements, and that's been extremely interesting, rather confusing at times, to be faced with a room full of accountants, but we do our best. And another one is that with the changes around the growth board and the LEP, a great deal of decision making is moving into other areas that are not directly answerable to an elected chamber in the way that the elected board of an individual council is. And certainly I'm delighted that the suggestion that was raised in this council that there should be a scrutiny committee for the growth board has been taken up and forms part of the draft terms of reference which are going to the growth board on Thursday. And I'd certainly urge colleagues to look at those terms of reference. You know, that committee is there for you to make sure that you have a way of challenging and being involved in the work of the growth board, which is taking a lot of important decisions on our behalf. Another point just to make is that our scrutiny officer has very helpfully attached an extract from a report by the Parliamentary Select Committee into the role of scrutiny. And I would urge colleagues to read that because I think it makes extremely interesting reading, because it allows us to compare how we do scrutiny with how it is perceived as being done across the country. And I think it's fair to say, without too much of a pat on the back, that in the typically sort of discreet and organised words of our officer, our practice, generally speaking, aligns with best practice, which I think could be taken as meaning we've got some bloody good officers. But there's an awful lot of interesting points in there. Sorry, Jean. One is that, you know, the committee, the select committee...
Councillor Gant, if you could just draw your remarks to a close, please.
I will, yes. It does say that some council scrutiny committees have trouble getting information, for example. Well, we don't, and that's really good. It says that often scrutiny is not given parity of esteem. Well, here it is, and that's terrific. Yes. And I would just like to
sentence,
to finish, please. It is one sentence, by thanking and paying tribute to the work of our scrutiny officers. It's been a particularly challenging year because there's been changes of personnel and periods when there hasn't been a scrutiny officer in place, but we really are lucky in the quality and dedication of the officers that we have.
Thank you, Councillor Gant. Any questions or comments on scrutiny? Councillor Simmons.
Yes, I would obviously agree with what Andrew said. The quality of our officers is exceptional, and it does. I'm referring to Appendix 3. Maybe I don't quite share the sort of. I mean, certainly are lessons to learn here, and for example, in particular, I felt under role of the public, there's a lot there we could do about digital engagement, and I don't think scrutiny, and I speak as a former chair as well, is that I don't think we've done the best in that. And if best practice is about engaging the public more, I think we do need to look at that. So I'm just wondering what plans Chair has, I guess if you're still Chair, but whoever chairs, and maybe that's something that you could refer forward to the future Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gant.
Yes, thanks very much, Craig. Sorry, I got a bit carried away there and ran out of time. I was going to make that point. Yes, the Select Committee makes all sorts of interesting suggestions about how scrutiny might develop. They are not going to be binding, which is good, because, for example, one of them is that scrutiny recommendations come to full council, which I think would just make the whole process slower. But I do agree with you that I think the one thing we can do better is engagement with the public, and certainly, you know, who knows who'll be on the... thank you very much. Who knows who'll be on the Scrutiny Committee after May, but I absolutely will certainly be taking that forward if I have any involvement.
Thank you. Any other comments from anybody? No? Thank you. We note that report. I think we should break for tea now and aim to be back at just about 7, if we can, for the next session. Thank you. can I just say that I think perhaps we would all agree that that was a especially good council tea. And I wonder if we could pass our thanks to the cooks, those who prepared it, please. Thank you. Okay, now we have public speakers. I've got to find them in my...
Okay, thank you.
Hang on a moment, just a moment.
Hello?
I've got to find my place in the scheme of things.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Where have I got them, Jennifer? Are they in the right page? This problem of being on the right page, you know? Well done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda.
Hello.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address you. The issue I want to speak about is the problem of access and safe parking for large wheelchair accessible vehicles in the new Westgate and elsewhere in Oxford. Specifically, the problem is one of height restrictions. This may sound trivial, but it's not. The Westgate car park has a height restriction of 2 metres. The standard height of a large wheelchair accessible vehicle is 2.4 metres. There's therefore no way that a large wheelchair accessible vehicle can get into the new Westgate car park. Once inside, the Westgate is potentially an empowering space for disabled people, including those in larger electric wheelchairs, allowing them to enjoy a great new civic space along with everyone else. So, it's all the more frustrating that for those arriving at the new Westgate in large wheelchair accessible vehicles, that the complex is, in reality, an impregnable fortress, a situation I believe is at odds with the Council's stated mission of building a world-class city for everyone. Large wheelchair accessible vehicles are high for a reason. Sufficient headroom allows single users to load and unload safely using a built-in ramp system. Sufficient headroom allows carers for more seriously disabled people to move around the patient and wheelchair easily, ensuring safe care during transit and reducing chances of further head injuries while the vehicle is on the move. For these reasons, 2.4 metres is a standard height for large wheelchair accessible vehicles, although some can be even higher, as can passenger cars with hoists on the roof. For these reasons, BS 8300, that's the Code of Practice for Design of Buildings and their approaches to meet the needs of disabled people, BS 8300 stipulates headroom clearance of 2.6 metres as a minimum for car parks built within the last 2 years. Passengers using large wheelchair accessible vehicles include those with multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, motor neurone disease, as well as paraplegic and tetraplegic drivers. Charities, care homes for elderly adults and specialist children's homes, as well as individuals, are all users of large wheelchair accessible vehicles. I understand that the new generation of school buses are also being designed as wheelchair accessible vehicles and will thus come into this category too. But in the case of the Westgate, I believe the current provision for large wheelchair accessible vehicles is not only non-existent, but actually unsafe. There are no signs warning of height restrictions until the driver is already committed to going down the ramp into the car park. Indeed, signs to the excellent shop mobility scheme ironically lead you to believe that all disabled vehicles are welcome. It is only once you're on the ramp that a dangerous situation becomes apparent. At that point, a sign orders you to do a U-turn on the ramp, with exiting cars accelerating round the corner up the ramp, having passed through the ticket barriers. This design flaw needs urgent attention before an already vulnerable person in the back of a large wheelchair accessible vehicle is seriously injured. All new car parks like that at the Westgate should be consistent with British Standard 8300, with reasonable adjustments for disabled people as laid out in the 2010 Equalities Act. I've made a short film illustrating from a personal point of view the problems faced by users of these vehicles, which I hope some council members may have had a chance to view before this meeting. Finally, I would also like the Council to consider the implications for users of large wheelchair accessible vehicles for the headroom barriers currently going up in car parks all over Oxford. Whatever the reasons for this, I would ask councillors to bear in mind that these headroom barriers have the potential to exclude disabled people and groups in large wheelchair accessible vehicles from every space where such barriers exist. This, I'm sure, is an unintended consequence of some other decision, but it's one with consequences for disabled people nonetheless. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Tidball would like to answer.
So thank you very much indeed, Amanda, for raising this really important issue. On the points relating to the Westgate, the very important points, we have a motion coming up later in the agenda, and I will be supporting that motion, and we'll make a full speech outlining the points of support there, if that's okay, so that we save the material being repeated again. On your points around the need to consider what's happening on new car parks that are going up across the city, I'll make sure our planning team have that message conveyed to them, and indeed Councillor Alex Hollingsworth, who is the board member with this in his portfolio and can't be here this evening, that he has also encouraged and made sure that he keeps a very close eye on those developments and perhaps review situations where that has happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again for coming. Nigel Gibson is not here?
He's filming, I think.
Right. So you're not speaking? Well, you're down here. You was down here as an address. You're not doing that. So Judith on the Windrush Day. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, councillors, my last address to full council at the end of January referred to January's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day and to the fact that this April commemorated the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. I also mentioned that Oxford City Council observes a range of days celebrating various communities within the city, but has no special day of significance to those of African heritage. I believe the city's African heritage community are severely underrepresented, ill-considered, poorly served, and generally neglected. Those of African heritage tell me that they feel they are being ignored, stigmatised, and met with racism and disparity. Another significant anniversary for the African heritage community is fast approaching, Windrush Day on the 22nd of June. After World War II, Britain's post-war national rebuilding programme prompted invitations to Commonwealth citizens to come to the mother country's aid. On the 22nd of June, 1948, the MV Empire Windrush landed at Tilbury Docks, carrying 492 Jamaican passengers who were termed the Windrush Generation. This was the first of many arrivals of Commonwealth citizens willing to help rebuild a broken Britain after the war. This year, Friday the 22nd of June, marks the 70th anniversary of this Windrush landing. Many of these invited Commonwealth workers, British citizens, were treated incredibly badly after their arrival. But, despite experiencing years of extreme racial discrimination, they contributed widely to the UK economy and culture. Shockingly, their children, who arrived in Britain between 1948 and 1971, are now in the news for receiving further discrimination and injustice. After years of working, paying tax, and participating in community life, they have been incorrectly identified as undocumented or illegal migrants because, having arrived as children, they are now unable to provide formal paperwork proving their lifetime association with the UK. Some of these are Oxford residents. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This year would be a good year for you, the City Council, to address the injustices to and to understanding the particular challenges facing Oxford's African heritage community and make Oxford more welcoming to this group. One small step would be to help to celebrate Windrush Day to remind us how much the African heritage community is a crucial part of British culture and that racism and intolerance are completely unacceptable. This year, Windrush Day is in Refugee Week, 18th to the 24th of June. There are two further pertinent commemorative days recognised internationally by the United Nations. These are August the 23rd, Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its Abolition, observed annually to remind people of the tragedy of the transatlantic slave trade, and December the 2nd, Abolition of Slavery Day. This is held to raise awareness of the atrocities of modern slavery. I wish to invite the City Council to work with an organisation with which I am associated, the Oxford African History Celebration, OAHC, to commemorate these days. We would welcome your help in providing premises, funding and other support to promote events commemorating these days. I look forward to hearing how the City Council will assist OAHC with these commemorations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Judith for raising this important issue. I said earlier that I would be giving a statement to Council on this issue in any event, but I deliberately waited until this point because it seemed sensible to raise it at the same time as we were responding to your statement, as you have raised the issue of this injustice. This whole affair is a shameful episode for which the Prime Minister personally needs to accept responsibility, along with her Conservative and Lib Dem coalition colleagues, who supported a change in the law in 2014 which has directly led to this situation. The nature of this mean-spirited and discriminatory policy is that people are not necessarily aware of the problems that they face until they're asked for proof of identity when applying for work, benefits, new access to healthcare or a pension. I would like to reassure councillors and the public that in Oxford, City Council staff working in our customer services teams have been briefed to do all they can to help people who find themselves in this situation, and more information will be put out in our next Tenants newsletter. We're aware that people are only just beginning to realise their situation. So far, we have had a small number of inquiries, but we expect this to grow in light of recent publicity. We're fortunate in Oxford to have a number of excellent organisations such as Asylum Welcome and Open Door Oxford and the advice agencies that the City Council supports with funding, who are well placed to give helpful advice and support. I would urge anyone who finds themselves in this situation to contact an advice agency, the City Council or their MP, depending on their circumstances. And I would remind councillors of the advice note that was circulated earlier today. The way the government has used its immigration laws to discriminate against the Windrush generation is utterly unacceptable and mean-spirited. In Oxford, we are proud of the huge contribution that they and other Commonwealth citizens have made to our city. The City Council was proud to support the combined celebrations of Commonwealth Day and the Single Act of Remembrance in March, recognising the role that Commonwealth citizens played in supporting our country in its hour of greatest need, as well as the massive contribution made every single day in the NHS, in social care and education, and building up our vibrant local economy. Given all that these citizens have done since the Empire Windrush arrived in England 70 years ago to come to our support after the Second World War, you would have thought this government would want to recognise this and celebrate it in this anniversary year. Instead, they have denied hard-working members of the African Caribbean community their rightful access to health services, benefits and housing, and refuse them re-entry to the UK after they visit their relatives in the Caribbean. By creating a hostile environment for immigrants and treating the Windrush generation so badly, they have again revealed their true colours. They remain the nasty party, as the current Prime Minister and architect of the immigration laws, Theresa May, memorably described them. We will also want to see Oxford City Council support celebrations of the Windrush anniversary in June. We will work with local community groups to see how we can support their celebrations and recognise the contribution to our city. On behalf of the City of Oxford, I know that colleagues across the Council will want to say thank you to the African Caribbean community as we do to all the different communities who contribute to the rich diversity of Oxford life.
Thank you. Oh, Judith, you have another address for
I
us?
do. Lord Mayor Councillors, in December 2014, despite many objections, the City Council decided to sell the former Temple Cowley Pools, TCP, site to Housing Association Catalyst. Included in this sale was the land which had been used for many years as a car park by the Temple Cowley Library. This car park had space for around 10 vehicles and was an essential component of the library, especially for its elderly and disabled users. Planning permission for developing the TCP site was formally granted in February 2018, and part of the sale and grant of planning permission conditions included a legal obligation on Catalyst to provide a minimum of 3 parking spaces for Temple Cowley Library staff and users somewhere on the TCP site. Since planning permission was granted, contractors for Catalyst have boarded up the entire library car park without providing any alternative parking spaces on the site. I have notified the County Council of this, and Catalyst have acknowledged their obligation, but have still done nothing to provide any parking spaces for the library. This is most unacceptable, as visitors requiring parking have to park either on the narrow library slip road, into which Catalyst have trespassed with their hoarding, or in the very limited parking spaces in the area if they can find one. The hoarding around the car park has also severely restricted access to and vision of the library cycle racks. I am sure that this lack of visibility contributed to the theft only last week of 2 cycles locked to the racks. I am asking the City Council, as vendors of the TCP site, before proceeding with final completion of the sale, to immediately enforce the obligation on Catalyst to provide a minimum of 3 parking spaces for Temple Cowley Library. I believe that Catalyst are flouting their legal obligation to the detriment of library staff and users. I would also ask the City Council to encourage Catalyst to improve the accessibility and visibility of the library cycle racks. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you for raising those issues. We will look into them and we will give you a written response.
Thank you very much for coming. Right, then have I think Artwell next. Hello, Artwell.
Hello.
Welcome.
Okay. I would like to invite the Labour-controlled Oxford City Council to apologise to those in need of affordable accommodation, key workers, and for those for whom 2/3 of their income is spent on rental property in Oxford. As this awful situation is for many people in Oxford, the contract with Grosvenors to construct 800 homes on Barton Park has actually added to Oxford's housing crisis. A seller on Sandhills Estate, who has a 3-bedroom home, has added £130,000 to her asking price, simply to keep in line with the extortionate prices of £600,000 which Grosvenors has set for a 3-bedroom home on the Barton Park estate. Oxford's estate agents warned that the inflated prices being asked of Barton Park would have the effect of raising the average price of an Oxford home from £400,000 to nearer the Barton Park's price of £600,000 for a family home. The Oxford Mail front page on Monday the 16th of April carried the headline, "Need a home? Go to Walsall." The high rents are forcing the council to move people 100 miles away from this city. I regard the £600,000 for a Barton Park home as completely corporate greed. How does aiding what I believe to be Grosvenor's corporate greed tally with the mission of the highly paid city executive officers to promote sustainable communities and community development and social integration? I believe that Oxford Labour-led City Council is directly responsible for the inflated Oxford house prices, into which has been aggravated by prices in Barton Park development. I invite Oxford City Councillors to apologise for what I consider to be their financial incompetence, which will only add to the misery for thousands of Oxford home seekers. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. You have, sorry. Thank you. You have a written response from Councillor Rowley, and I think that is what you can have. Thank you very much for coming.
I'm on now.
Got things
Yeah.
slightly out of order. So, thank you.
I'm used to that, thank you. First, I'd like to thank Council for the answer to my question. However, it doesn't address the point I was making, which was since the start of April, the prices at ferry for concessions went up from £1.30 to £2, irrespective of what time of day it was. This is absolutely outrageous. A 53% increase on the disabled is just not fair. I don't understand how it was allowed to get through, other than, of course, the increase was buried in the budget in Appendix 7, right in the middle, where no one's going to notice it. So what I'd like to know, really, as much as anything, well, there's an update for you. Miraculously, after I put the question in, the prices in ferry have now come down from £2 to £1.50. So thank you, whoever sorted that out, but you make no reference to it in the answer. I would like to know why there is this discrimination as well on certain peak times, why the disabled shouldn't be or shouldn't be discouraged from going at those times as opposed to any other as well. And of course, other people who've paid £2 each time they've been to ferries during April, are they going to get their 50p back for every visit they've had? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have an answer?
Yeah, so there's a written response. I'm not going to add a great deal more to that, other than the prices were consulted on, the fees and charges, which are the maximum fees and charges which can be charged in our leisure centre, were consulted upon and went through all the appropriate channels of the council before they were agreed. What I would say is that having looked back at the consultation document and the questions that were asked online as part of the budget consultation, I don't think that was as clear as it could have been in terms of highlighting the change that was in there. And that is something I've discussed with officers, and I hope lessons will be learned for future years.
Okay, and are people going to get their money back?
If people have been overcharged for access to our leisure centres, then they should get in contact with the leisure centre in the first instance, or if they don't receive satisfaction there, with the City Council, and we will look into that on a case-by-case basis.
A case-by-case basis, thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Judith.
Thank you. I have a question for us. Lord Mayor, Councillors, me again. On April the 1st, Oxford Direct Services, ODS, became a limited company. As they are occupying City Council premises at the Marsh Road Depot in Cowley, I wish to know the following. 1. How much rent is ODS paying the City Council? 2. How much are ODS paying in business rates? 3. As ODS have publicly stated their expansion plans, what measures are they taking to relocate away from their Marsh Road site? For example, at present, their services include working on a wide range of vehicles, from taxis to buses to private cars. Their current site, in a residential location and next to leisure facilities, is totally unsuitable for this operation and totally unsuitable for any subsequent expansion. Local residents are convinced that the expansion of ODS is what necessitated their theft of part of Cowley Marsh Park. And I might add that residents are very concerned that the building work going on looks very permanent, not temporary. My fourth question is, as planning permission for expansion into the Cowley Marsh Park wildflower meadow was granted for 5 years, and some 6 months of this have passed already, how will the City Council reassure residents that it will ensure that ODS relocates within the next 4.5 years and restores the wildflower meadow to its previous state? Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. There is a written up response here from Councillor Turner, who doesn't appear to be with us.
I'm thinking it might be helpful for me to read it because it won't have been circulated.
Yeah.
So on behalf of Councillor Turner, in answer to question 1, how much rent is ODS paying the City Council, the answer is a total of £520,000 per annum, which is at market rent rates for the premises around the city. In answer to question 2, in terms of business rates, 223k per annum. And in response to questions 3 and 4, part of the ODS plan is to consider its corporate property portfolio to review whether it's fit for purpose to support the business expansion plans, and this will be looked at over the next couple of years. The Council is mindful of the 5-year planning permission granted at the Cowley Marsh Park site.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Judith. Now we get on to the motions. Can they be embargoed response, as it were?
Yes.
Not until then. But they are in the embargoed papers that we were sent. So we do have them. Right. Thank you. Right. Now we get on to motions. Yes, there we are. We have 1 hour for motions. That takes us to 8:30, which is reasonably civilised, I think. Right. The first motion is the one addressing the housing crisis proposed by Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Yep, apologies, me again. Since submitting this motion, Labour nationally has launched a consultation on affordable housing, and I strongly welcome the proposals set out by Jeremy Corbyn and John Healey to redefine affordable housing by scrapping the Conservative so-called affordable rent at up to 80% of market rents and introducing a new definition linked to incomes, including social rent, living rent and low-cost ownership. This is really crucial because affordability is as we know, an absolute key. There will be a new duty to deliver affordable housing for councils with a new needs assessment and enhanced new homes bonus for affordable housing. A new English sovereign land trust to make more land available more cheaply, new borrowing freedoms and central funding to get councils and housing associations building at scale, and a fully fledged new department for housing which will drive through our new deal on housing. So I think all of that is massively to be welcomed. Affordability and definitions of affordability, as I said, are a key issue here. We have to build more genuinely affordable homes. In Oxfordshire, only Oxford City has a definition of affordable housing that is genuinely affordable. As part of our local plan consultation, we will be looking at issues of key worker housing and density. However, the argument that we could build all the houses we need in the city just by increasing density is a fallacy. There is a limited amount of land available for building on that becomes available each year, and much of it is not in the council's control. You'd pretty much have to knock down Oxford in its entirety and rebuild it on its current boundaries in order to get sufficiently high density to fully meet the housing needs in the city. So we have always argued that building close to the city on some of the so-called greenbelt land should be looked at closely as a more environmentally friendly approach. People want to live in the city, they want to work here, and there are good transport links within the city. Building housing on the edge and around the city makes sense. Of course, Greenbelt land is sensitive, but it was never intended to be set forever in stone on its current boundaries. The thing to be doing is to constantly be reviewing it and to make sure that when we do take land out of Greenbelt, that we have other land that we put in its stead.
Right. Thank you. We have a seconder, I believe. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It seemed particularly appropriate for me to second this motion, not only because of my portfolio, but also because in Barton we have the first council housing built by Oxford City Council in 1925, and we have what 60 years later it was feared might be the last in Alderbarton Drivers. Bob Price will know because he was chair of the housing committee that got those built. I'm therefore very proud that Oxford City Council, under this administration, is building another 354 houses to let to local people at council rents within my ward. However, everybody knows that we need more. Everybody knows that Oxford's problems cannot be solved by Oxford alone. Therefore, I support the idea that consideration should be given, very careful consideration, to taking further land out of Oxford's Greenbelt. The MHCLG's guidance states, and I agree with this, and I hope that members around the room would support this, that preference when, in the exceptional circumstances where that has to be done, preference should be given to land which already has good transport links and where there have already been some aspects of development. Therefore, there are clearly some sites on the city boundary which are more suitable than others. I am not proposing, and we are not proposing, a free-for-all to developers on Greenbelt land in the vicinity of the city, but carefully designed, proper new communities with decent amount of green space and access to countryside. Just one word on why I'm afraid we won't be accepting the amendments. There are a couple of points which I think are particularly outstanding. One, that housing need is not exceptional circumstances. Well, we have the least affordable house prices in the country, along with a couple of other cities, and dozens of people sleeping on the streets. I suppose the only argument for that not being exceptional circumstances is that the governments over the last 8 years have done their best to make them ordinary circumstances, but that is a political and not a planning point, so let's leave that aside. And it seems rather odd, rather than calling for a small adjustment to the Greenbelt boundary, as we are, to call for a review of the entire Greenbelt, because that could have unintended consequences, which I think that the Lib Dems colleagues in other district councils may not be particularly pleased with. We are calling for limited, careful development where and when it is needed, and not a free-for-all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gant, do you propose your amendment?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Our amendment improves this council's approach to housing and growth. Let's remember where we're starting from. We have consistently said that this council should be willing to look again at potential development sites in the city that are currently protected for employment. We've never said that that would provide all the housing that Oxford needs, but it will alleviate the emphasis on building in less suitable areas like Greenbelt, and is in line with the emphasis on brownfield and previously developed land in the emerging NPPF. We should also remember the City Council's historically slow rate of housing development. Just 40 affordable homes were built in the city last year, vastly fewer than in neighbouring districts. We note the repeated failure of the City Council to deliver its own agreed policy on the proportion of homes that should be affordable in new development, while at the same time market housing is not well enough aligned to the needs of ordinary people and is far too expensive to provide real assistance to the needs of the city, as Barton Park has amply demonstrated, and this is particularly true on sites wholly or partly owned by the City Council. Planning policy does not yet work properly in terms of types of dwelling and tenure, constructive relationships with engaged partners, smart use of design and density. We welcome interesting moves in these areas, but clearly need to see how the implication of good design can be worked out before deciding that we have to build all over the Greenbelt. Methods of calculating housing numbers are still being clarified and, at the very least, will not command public confidence when even the government's own housing minister states publicly that the figures being used are far in excess of identified need. Almost most important of all, the motion as unamended shows no understanding of what Greenbelt is for. And I think it was quite interesting that Councillor Brown referred to it as the so-called Greenbelt. It's not a stage set, it is a real contributor to health, sustainability and well-being. The implications of this motion are like beaching was for transport. When it's gone, it's gone. It's clear to us that any review of the Oxford Greenbelt should be comprehensive and not piecemeal, and should include full public consultation and not be driven, as at present, by which of the neighbouring districts councils will play ball and which won't. I move the amendment.
Thank you. Have a seconder? Councillor Dandle-Mills? Please. Do you speak now? Or?
The role of the Greenbelt has been very significant.
Can you get a bit closer to your microphone, please?
The role of the Greenbelt has been very significant in preventing really the destruction of much of the countryside in the southeast of England. I mean, if we only have to look at places in the US and things where they've not had these sort of controls to see the kind of apocalypse it could release. And it needs to be done in a well-measured way in which the entity of the Greenbelt is looked at and remodified so that housing needs can be met in a sensible ecosystem functioning way that embodies both sort of humanitarian, humane and also scientific values. And I think that is the way to get the best possible deal for all our citizens.
Thank you. Any statements? Councillor Wolfe?
Speaking to the amendment, Lord Mayor. Greens, of course, support green belt protection. You would expect nothing less. Green Party national policy is to strengthen green belt legislation so that it stands a better chance of delivering on its aims. It is essentially blunt legislation involving drawing lines on maps, which has, despite considerable success in preventing uncontrolled urban sprawl, as has just been said, it's often failed, actually, in its declared objectives. And Green Party policy is that it needs sharpening up. That sharpening up would require much clearer and more specific assessments of particular sites and locations. The idea that Greens could agree to what seems to suggest a blanket approval in principle for building on Greenbelt, although I do note what Councillor Rowley has just said, that they're not actually proposing...
Speaking to the amendment.
Oh, sorry, you're quite right. I think, yes, okay. So, obviously, we can't support a blanket approach to the Greenbelt because, you know, we will want the policy to be a lot sharper and a lot tighter. And generalisation, whether it's in the amendment or in the substantive motion, is not something which finds traction. I think we're minded without any great enthusiasm to support the amendment because there are some qualifying statements in there which are worth bearing in mind.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Lord Mayor, the amendment is wrong in a couple of very important considerations. Just want to go through those. Firstly, the Growth Board and the councils in the Growth Board undertook a full comprehensive review of the Greenbelt through consultants, land use consultants in 2016. It was published in 2016 and has found the basis of the proposals which Charwell, the Vale and West have put forward involving taking land out of the Greenbelt.
Can you bring your microphone a bit closer so you can be better heard?
So the study can be read in detail. What the consultants did, working with officers across the councils, was to assess a whole range of parcels of land against the 5 purposes set out in the National Planning Policy Framework, which are the purposes of Greenbelt, and assessed them in terms of priority, and then that has been the basis on which individual councils have put forward their proposals in their local plans. So it has been done. A second study was undertaken by Kirkham Consultants, coming to very similar conclusions for SODC and published on the SODC website. So that work has been done, and the proposals from Charwell and other councils reflect the priority criteria there. Secondly, the Growth Board has always made it clear in their assessment of housing need that where Greenbelt land was taken, that we would look at the proposals for developing more Greenbelt or putting more land into Greenbelt further out. So an example of that involves the land around Woodstock, where surprisingly you may not think that the land around Blenheim Palace is in fact not in the Greenbelt, whereas the airport and areas around that is. So the intention was to look at the proposals for putting more land into Greenbelt, and that still is a way forward. Secondly, in terms of employment land, since 1990, the amount of employment land in the city that's been taken out of employment for housing is phenomenal. Everything from the station site up to what was the radiator site is now housing, and that is significantly added to the number of houses built in the city in that period. In Oxpens, which was, of course, or is now our site with Nuffield, there will be 500 houses built, rather than a very large employment site, which was part of the original idea. We put housing into that particular site. The development of Blackbird Leys, the Blackbird Leys extension, as it was called at the time, was originally going to have some employment land in there. We took it out and put all housing into there. So the development in the city over the last 25 years has been substantially housing. It has not developed significant new site for employment. The only significant new land for employment has been in 2 places. One is at Cowley, where the old Cowley Works closed down, and that was developed as a business park, and of course around the Churchill Hospital, which was largely hospital site, and that's developed into an employment site for the university. So to argue that there should be even more destruction of employment land, there's not much left for housing, is nonsense. So I think that the amendment is misguided and mischievous and should be rejected.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Any contributions from anybody else? No? Councillor Gant, perhaps you would like to sum up?
Not much to add, Lord Mayor. Thank colleagues for their contributions. I mean, you know, Bob's obviously been involved in this area for a long time, and he and I have discussed these matters before. I mean, you know, our submission to the local plan review contains sites that we believe should be used for housing that are not. He mentions the figure of 500 homes at Oxpens. You know, if it turns out that planning and design can be used in such a way that, you know, innovative models, perhaps drawing on the kind of approach to town planning that is used more regularly on the continent, can deliver more there, then that would be a good thing and would, I think, point in the direction that we are urging. This is certainly not mischievous. I understand the use of that word, but it isn't. It's a genuine attempt to get this right. And I do have concerns about this idea of simply moving the green belt somewhere else. I mean, you know, if a piece of green open space surrounds a particular town, it doesn't help if you live in that town if it then surrounds a different town. You know, that might be nice for the second town, but for the first town, it's gone. This is a sensible, proportionate addition to the Labour policy, and I commend it to Council.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, would you like to comment as the proposer of the motion before we vote on the amendment?
I think I've got nothing to add to Councillor Price's excellent summary of why we should not vote for this amendment.
Thank you. In that case, I'll call for the vote. Those in favour of the amendment, please show. Thank you. And those against?
That will be 29, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So that amendment is lost. We now go to debate the motion, unamended. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Wolfe.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I've already made it clear that a motion suggesting a sort of general carte blanche to build on the Green Belt cannot get Green Party support. I'm glad to hear that that isn't what's being proposed, but that's how I read it. And I'm sure the proposer knows this all too well. I hope I'm not too cynical in suspecting that, by linking building on Greenbelt with the need for social housing, there's an attempt maybe to lever us into a position where we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. And so I want to just say that I don't think there are any lessons that we can be taught over the need for social housing. Social housing is Green Party policy. We have held our Labour colleagues to account consistently on the need for social housing and have had to call them out on the failure to deliver on this quite consistently for quite a long period. I've got a whole long list of particular stories in which we have done precisely this. Westgate would be one, where we owned the land and we ended up with some luxury apartments with a contribution to build social housing somewhere else. You had the land, you let it go, and you can't then complain if you're struggling for the land. I think I was under the impression that Lucy Faithfull House was going to be developed for social housing. Apparently that's no longer the case. There's a small matter of Templar Square, of course. So, and more recently, the Greens proposed coming to an arrangement with the university to find empty commercial properties for rough sleepers over the winter. Somehow that never came to anything either. So, we've been pressing on this, and there's no question where we stand on the need for social housing and the need for housing for rough sleepers and the rest of it. I also might just note that the last time the Labour Party was in national government, it failed to repeal the right to buy legislation, which has not exactly helped the situation either. So we will take no lessons on social housing from Labour. The second thing is that Labour's policies have been economic growth. I hear what Councillor Price has said here, but it's been more jobs in the city, and we have continually challenged this from this side of the chamber, asking, and where are these people going to live? And Councillor Tanner's famous answer was, if you don't grow, you die. Do you remember? So by 2036, we're expecting 65,000 commuters struggling to get in and out of the city daily. You cannot deliberately worsen an already existing crisis and then expect us to support lazy land grabs on Greenbelt to compensate for policy failure. And maybe you're not proposing that. I imagine not. Our officers are onto the case. Our new planning policies being formulated will, if adopted, go some way towards addressing this policy mismatch between housing and growth. Oxford's economic success is to be celebrated, of course, but our city growth policies coming on top of the national housing crisis generated over 35 years of Tory, Labour and coalition neoliberal governments have created this crisis. Until we've adopted our new public policies...
That's it. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wolfe. Councillor Turner.
Thanks very much, Lord Mayor. Sorry to be late still because of trains, I'm afraid. But I just want to offer a sort of brief comment on Dick's reflections. I find it very strange that in saying we need to make sure there is more land for development close to Oxford, and of course I think we would want to see our very exacting policies on affordable housing applied, that doesn't in some way relate to social housing. It quite clearly does. I see the issue rather differently. I see that there are many who talk the talk on the need for social housing, and in the abstract there'll be all sorts of comments and all sorts of critiques, and we just had another one just now about what a jolly good thing it would be to have more. And then there are those who walk the walk. And walking the walk also involves sometimes being willing to, if you like, stand up and be counted in the face of public criticism and public hostility because you recognise the need for additional housing. And I have to say I've lost count of a number of times when there's all sorts of commitment in the abstract, and when it comes then to concrete sites, the Green Party finds itself in opposition. And what we're saying is we recognise that there will be public opposition sometimes to this sort of policy, but we do sometimes have to take difficult decisions. That is our responsibility if we want to see housing supply expanded. And I think, yet again, what we're seeing by introducing this issue and by the fact that it looks like at least the Green Party opposite, aren't going to support it, is that they're willing to yap on about the principle of social housing and how good it would be, but then when it comes to standing up and being counted and being willing to make some, perhaps even some electoral sacrifices, perhaps even upsetting their core voters, something like that, then they're not willing to do it. And I think that's deeply regrettable.
Right. I take it that nobody else wishes to speak? All right, we have got some. We've got it. I didn't see your hands going up before. Councillor Mills, Councillor Simmons, yeah? Anybody else?
I've
Don't want to lose them.
several points. I mean, there's many points to be made about this. I mean, one of the obvious things is with the, how are we going to see some sort of benefit for the citizens of Oxford from the enormous uplift in property values that changing the Greenbelt boundaries will achieve? I mean, this is basically an alchemical process whereby fields that are worth virtually nothing are turned into gold-plated thing, and there obviously will be enormous amounts of money generated by changes in the Greenbelt. And how will the citizens of Oxford, who will be losing access to green space and will be suffering, how will that newfound wealth be shared with them?
Good question. Councillor Thomas? No, it was Councillor Simmons. Right. Whichever of you.
Sorry, we're sharing
whichever
a microphone.
Yes.
I don't think we're otherwise indistinguishable. So, I mean, I think Ed is right to challenge us on this, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around the framing of the debate on Greenbelt, and I think because the debate is biased towards the expansionist aims of the city, we end up with a sort of debate framed in the wrong way and is likely to lead to the wrong answer. And what's the answer is how can we provide housing for the people primarily who work in the city? Because as I said, if you can continue to increase the number of people working in the city, 45,000 commuting now and it's going up to 65,000, can you really build 20,000 new homes essentially, or 10,000 new homes in that time? Of course not. So we're going to increase. If you increase the economic gain, and Bob Price missed out a lot of sites like Northern Gateway and Westgate site, which are also adding thousands of jobs to the city, and also some of the expansions of the business park that have happened during that time. So there are many more jobs being created in the city, and that were a good thing were the housing to be provided. Otherwise, you're trying to plug a leaking bucket. You're trying to fill a housing bucket, you're pouring water in, the bucket's leaking. You're always going to be chasing your tail. You're never going to be able to provide that. So the answer is we have to look at the leaking bucket first. We have to plug the hole in the buckets. We have to get a balance between jobs, the economy and housing. And that's a challenge. That's a difficult message to sell. And that's the area where we are being challenged. Because if we are standing up and saying jobs have to be in balance with housing, that's the political message that is difficult to sell to the electorate. That's where we're standing by our principles. Because unless the demand and supply are in balance, we will never solve the housing crisis in this city. And that's the reality. And that's the reality that you over there are unwilling to face. You're just not willing to face that we have to control jobs, because that will be standing and challenging to your core support, that jobs have to be managed according to the supply of housing. Because the jobs won't go away, they'll go other places, and that's good for their economy, maybe not so good for ours. So, and there's loads of other myths around that somehow the green belt is a green wall around the city that's impenetrable. Of course not. It's transport corridors, roads going all through it. There's building happening all the time in the green belt. It's so that, there's these myths built up about there's some green wall. You can cycle across the green belt in 10 minutes in some places. It's not this big, thick, impenetrable belt. So just because of that, I think the myth is also that the Greens haven't supported development in Greenbelt. We supported Shipton Quarry. It's not in the city, within the directly city, so it might not meet the expansionist aims of this council, but it's on the railway line, 7 minutes into the city centre. That would be a great place. 8,000 homes were proposed there. I don't think Labour supported that. That's technically in Greenbelt, but it's an old quarry that's used for car parking now. So there are examples where we have supported it, and there are examples where we would support it in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Simmons. Councillor Landell Mills, could you turn your microphone off, please? Thank you very much. You might wish for some summing up, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, there was, frankly, a lot of frank nonsense being talked about affordable housing on a number of sites around the city. But I think Councillor Turner made some very good points about social housing and the need to actually support social housing on real sites as opposed to just in some kind of theoretical way. And some important points which I think Councillor Simmons acknowledged about how we sometimes have to stand up in the face of opposition. Councillor Simmons did say that we were right to challenge on this issue and that it was a balancing act. I think it is a balancing act. What I would say is that the balance has to be making sure that we don't just throw out employment entirely, and that, as seems to be being argued by the parties opposite, but also that to make sure that we are building housing. And we cannot say that housing can be built on every single piece of land in the city, and that somehow that will enable us to meet the housing needs. We do have to recognise the fact that housing will need to be provided across the county in order to meet the housing needs of this city. So I would urge people to support the motion.
Thank you. Those in favour of the motion, please show. Thank you. Thank you. And those against? Apparently not. Thank you. Thank you. Abstentions?
7 abstentions.
Thank you. Right.
Lord Mayor.
Yes.
The second motion on point 4, it mentions taxi rank. And I'm happen to be a taxi driver. So I take a legal advice. You want to sit here and leave the room?
I have a feeling that perhaps you should leave the room. What does our monitoring officer think? Just a moment. Placement of taxes, yes. I think it's marginalised. Yeah. So, what's the ruling? Right, thank you. Not taking a decision, therefore, taxi drivers can stay. Thank you for raising that point. Good to have it clear. Right, so, Councillor Goddard, would you propose a motion, please?
Yes, thanks very much, my Lord Mayor. I'd hope that this can be a fairly uncontroversial debate, possibly even short enough to allow 1 or 2 other motions if they can be fitted in. As the motion is designed to encourage the City Council to, fairly uncontroversially, improve access for all its citizens to the Westgate Centre. I was impressed about an hour ago, as I'm sure all colleagues were, by Ms Mackenzie Stewart's very clear-sighted and lucid account of the specific difficulties relating to wheelchair-accessible vehicles in the Westgate. As the film that she referred to makes clear, but she didn't quite rightly mention in her presentation, these difficulties are specifically faced by her and her husband, who is himself severely disabled, in accessing the Westgate in a vehicle which is by no means unusual in its design for somebody in her husband's position. The motion identifies then these difficulties and a number of potentially related ones as causes for concern. Now, there's no question but that for the most part, access to Westgate, and again, Ms Mackenzie Stewart acknowledged this, is well designed and is inclusive. What we are looking for here then is improvement to allow all people the easiest possible access to what is, after all, a major attraction in our city centre. Now, to that extent, it would clearly be desirable for the leader and chief executive on behalf of the city to work with the Westgate Alliance, and indeed with other interested parties. Given the concerns about disabled parking near the centre, the County Council would be an obvious one such, on how to deal with the difficulties which Ms Mackenzie Stewart and others have identified. It's not intended to be a very onerous task. I don't imagine it would be rocket science to sort out many of these difficulties, and indeed if it turns out that there are already moves underway to do so, then it would be good for that to be made public as soon as possible. More generally, such discussions as suggested by our motion should cover the widest issues of access for disabled people to the Westgate Centre. What's working, what might not be, what should be improved. And of course, this isn't just a question relevant to Westgate. My ward colleague, who, as you probably know, isn't able to be here tonight due to illness, but who is going to second this motion, has direct personal experience of difficulty of access, not only to the Westgate, but also to the main railway station, for example. She refers to taxi drivers being concerned that pick-up and drop-off points in those locations leave them, the taxi drivers, unable to assist disabled passengers as they'd wish. So this is clearly a broader issue than applying simply, in this particular case, simply to the Westgate Centre. What's clear here, however, is that there's demand for access for all to the Westgate, and that the City Council would be fulfilling its functions in the most positive way possible in working to achieve this. I beg to move, and I hope for support from around the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Wilkinson.
In Councillor Goff's absence, I'd like to formally second Lord Mayor, and I hope very much that this laudable motion will get cross-party support. Thank
so you reserve your right to speak to later. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Do we have some speakers? Mary, Councillor Tidball.
Hi, thank you. I support this motion, and I'm grateful to Amanda Mackenzie-Stewart for highlighting the importance of large wheelchair accessible vehicles, or WAVs, as she said. They are essential for disabled people who have large wheelchairs and headrests, improving their safety and comfort on car journeys and in transit. Such vehicles, as she also highlighted, ensure that people with complex needs have dignity in their care from personal assistants and carers. They enable them to safely move around the space inside the vehicle to work with the person with a disability. The current situation for disabled users of wheelchair-accessible vehicles who want to access car park provision at the Westgate is deeply concerning. Currently, the signage for vehicles over 6'6" appears only at the entrance immediately in front of the barriers to the car park. And as the helpful video that Amanda made demonstrated, the experience of carers driving disabled people in these WAVs places them in the position of having to do a very dangerous U-turn by this barrier. This is made worse by the height of the signage at that entrance, and City Council officers have informed me that they have already contacted Land Securities to improve signage at this point. WAV vehicles are imperative for certain individuals and groups of people with disabilities to access the facilities that many people take for granted. They allow for the social inclusion envisaged by the 2010 Equality Act, an act I'm proud my party legislated for. What is needed now are decent and dignified solutions by the Westgate Alliance and working in conjunction with the county to resolve the dire situation disabled users of these vehicles now find themselves in. New signage must be placed, therefore, prominently on both sides of Oxpens Road prior to entering the Westgate car park, well before the barrier entrance of that parking facility. Indeed, legally, under contract law, display conditions about what car park is accessible should require them to do so. This is reinforced by new building regulation BS 8300, which Amanda also referred to earlier. City Council officers are currently conducting a review about the difference between the latter regulation and the car park as it currently stands to clarify this situation, and will report back in due course. We will also be writing to the Westgate Alliance and our County Council colleagues to urge them to make a better plan for disabled users of WAVs, and more broadly to look at issues arising out of the Westgate so far. Buildings are very often, like the people that use them, dynamic, not static. We also call on the county to make urgent action to look at the options of providing a sheltered unloading bay by Paradise Place. Waiting shelters and bus stops are indeed their responsibility, and it is imperative we have practical and dignified solutions in order to ensure this parking is more pleasant for those disabled users who need it. The Westgate should be accessible, just one line to finish. The Westgate should be accessible to all, and such use should be an enjoyable experience. These steps will be important in ensuring
Thank you very much.
Inclusion.
That was
I hope my colleagues
rather more than one
join
sentence.
Join
Thank
us all
you.
in supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Well, Mayor, it's a very good motion and a very timely one, because it mentions in the last paragraph the importance of looking at the way in which the Alliance deal with the castle site, which they've now started to develop plans for. And some of the plans I've seen and discussed with them do involve quite significant changes to that site. But and I don't know how far you can see the question of disabled access, but
currently it's not used by the public at all, but it could potentially be a much better access point for disabled access, provided that the ramps internally are also changed. So that's a very important element as well. So I very, very much welcome this, and certainly my suggestion was before I retire and afterwards, I should try and push that forward.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Simmons, I think that will be the last speaker, or Councillor Thomas. I can't distinguish between the two of you.
I accept we are morphing a bit. Anyway, so of course we're supporting this motion, excellent motion, and thank you for bringing it to us. But it does raise a couple of questions in my mind, one of which is that if you read online, the Westgate make quite a big thing about having what they call an accessibility consultant on board all the way through the process. And if British Standard 8300 was relevant then, how did this happen? And are we going to be seeing similar problems, at City Council-owned car parks? And is there some connection between this height and efforts to try and restrict where travellers can move? Is there some connection here? But we support the motion, but it is surprising that this standard was ignored until it was raised very valiantly and strongly by a member of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. We could have summing up, please, from Councillor Goddard.
Yes, well, thanks very much to colleagues for their contributions and support. And it sounds, in truth, as though we're pushing at something of an open door here. As I said, there's clearly also a wider issue here beyond Westgate, and one hopes that if there's a positive outcome from this, then it sets a useful precedent for other significant sites within the city. I'm hoping that it'll be possible for all outcomes from discussions, as alluded to by Marie in her speech, will in due course be shared with the city, discussions with Westgate Alliance and with the county. Otherwise, thank you very much. I commend the motion.
Thank you. Those in favour of the motion, please show.
That's everyone, so that should be fine.
Thank you, gentlemen. Right, we move on to motion 3 from Councillor Brandt, phasing out unnecessary single-use plastics.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have to say I'm very pleased that we finally got to discuss it. It's the third time we've submitted this motion, and I'm hoping that there'll be cross-party support for this. So that's the indication I got. Plastics are everywhere, as we well known, and single-use plastics is even worse. We spend so much energy and so much resources into creating something that we use only once, and it's very. A lot of these things are really not crucial and not necessary. Just yesterday we had Earth Day celebrated across the globe, and one of the things that people were encouraged were to reduce their own personal plastic use on an individual basis. And of course that's an important move, but that's not enough. We have to change things on a much more fundamental level, which is where someone like the City Council comes in. We have our own, obviously we can put our own house in order and reduce plastic use on our own premises, but we also play a very important role in terms of coordinating people across, or organizations and businesses across the city, as we do on other things like the living wage issue, the low carbon network. We have precedents of achieving really good things in promoting ideals that we believe here in the council, even if we don't have the statutory right to regulate them or anything. But the fact that we are a centralizing body coordinating these things is very important. And even us as a council, we'd not like to think, we are forward-thinking, aware council. Even we find it difficult to completely get rid of plastics without any decision. I mean, this cup actually has some plastic in it, and it's not that easy to recycle. So by making this decision, we also have a much more focused view on how we do things in our own premises. And lastly, and not least, I think it's also by joining other towns and other organizations pledging to go plastic-free. I think we're sending a very important message to government that this needs to be tackled on a much more urgent basis. I mean, last week we had Michael Gove announcing that plastic straws are going to be banned, which is a lovely, great move, and it's going to help a lot of sea creatures being choked on it, but it's a tiny amount of all the plastic that we use, so really it's time to step up, and Oxford has an opportunity to lead here, so I hope you support this.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons, it really is you this time, I think.
I'll reserve my right to, and see if I need to. And if people oppose this vehemently, I will get up and defend it.
Thank you. Councillor Clarkson.
No, I think we should be supporting this. As a city like Oxford, we should be in the forefront of this. 10 days ago, I was in the Isles of Scilly and visiting one of the uninhabited islands there, uninhabited for several hundred years. Virtually no one visits it, but it was covered in plastic, which had just been washed ashore. The damage there to wildlife, to birds and to marine creatures is appalling. And having seen that on a tiny uninhabited island in somewhere which is really quite, quite remote and sparsely populated as the islands as a whole, it brought home to me just how much we should do here. And it's quite easy to get cups that we should all carry around with you. I've got one that's collapsible, which I just keep in my handbag. I should have brought it along tonight if I'd planned ahead. And you get, and I think we should all make a commitment ourselves just to do that, just as people carry around cloth bags now. It's not hard if you just get into the habit of it, and we should all be, we should definitely be leading the way in a city like Oxford.
Thank you. Councillor Tanner, I'm just wondering if we might get another motion in if we're not too long. Councillor Tanner and Councillor Dandle-Mills. Councillor Tanner first, then you, and that'll be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very pleased that Ruthie Brand has put this resolution. I should frankly miss her presence in this council when she's gone. And I'm not a supporter of the Green Party, as you know, but as Green Party councillors go, she's not bad. And
when avoiding references to the election,
what amazes me about this is bottled water in bottles. I mean, it's up in marketing terms, it's up there with selling ice cream to the Inuit, isn't it? I mean, why do we buy bottles filled with water from some spring, up a mountain far away, when you can turn the tap on and get just as clean, if not cleaner water out of the tap and refill? And why, do you ever have to buy more than one bottle? But people do. So if we could cut down on that, that would be a fantastic step forward. And it's been done. I'm not a supporter of the Conservative Party, the Conservative government either, Lord Mayor, but nonetheless, their ban on free plastic bags in big stores has made a huge difference. We no longer see in Oxford bags blowing down the street or blowing across the fields outside Oxford. That has been a great improvement, and we can do exactly the same with single-use plastics. As Councillor Brand has pointed out, the coffee and tea cups that we use this evening, I think, were not easily recyclable because they contain plastic. But if you go down to the CAF, our own cafe here, you can get this cup, and it says that this is no ordinary cup. The paper is from a sustainable source, and the lining is such that it's plant, not plastic. So, these cups are available. They should be used by cafes all across Oxford. I think that together, the City Council, retailers and the public, we can make Oxford a single-use plastic-free city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dandle-Mills.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just as a minor, we'd like to offer Lib Dem support for this motion, which we think is excellent and has our wholehearted support. Just as a minor correction, in fact, it was a Lib Dem motion that introduced the 5p charge for plastic bags. Yeah, I think basically the public is calling out for leadership on this. I mean, there seems to be widespread antipathy to plastic. I mean, it's abhorrent, the way it's polluting the world, the aquatic environment. It's I think we all share that. And the sooner we can start doing something a bit more tangible, the better. And also think here in Oxford, I think there is a lot of innovation, and I think the number of sensible, intelligent, sort of recyclable, sustainable solutions for packaging. I mean, packaging is not going to disappear. Will be really good. I mean, it's all part of a green business thing, which will come along very quickly. And we wholeheartedly support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Brandt, do you wish to sum up very briefly, and we might have a chance for
just to say thank you to everyone for supporting. Do you have? Yeah,
sorry.
to say thank you, and to be frank, I didn't expect anything less. So.
Right. Thank you. Those in favour of the motion, please show.
That's everything. That's 40.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now, we have got 12 minutes or so, which ought to be enough if people are fairly brief in their speeches to deal with motion 4. Councillor Price, would you do a truncated version of what you were going to say, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Many years ago, as an official of what was then called the Association of University Teachers, I marched along Whitehall under a banner which said, "Rectify the anomaly." It's one of the best slogans there's ever been. But this is a case where we also need to rectify the anomaly, because any other form of letting, whether it's as a guest house, a hotel, a holiday letting, an HMO, has to be regulated. They have to go through a planning permission, and they have to be regulated. The short lets are not covered by any form of regulation, either safety or planning. And frankly, it is a disgrace, because the original idea was you let an odd room now and again, but now they've become permanent lettings. In many places, they are taking over what would otherwise be family houses in many cases, and although the number of instances of illicit use is small, they are significant, and what is started can only go on. So what this motion calls for, and I hope it'll have the same kind of support as Ruthie's motion had as well, is a very sensible approach which is supported by the LGA, supported by other local authorities, to create a definition of a property used permanently or regularly in a separate planning class, to licence them appropriately, and to treat them as commercial rather than residential premises, and to work with other local authorities to that effect. And I move, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman, do you wish to speak now?
Yes, please, if I may, Lord Mayor. And Bob's intervention there is just typical of what we're going to be missing, actually, in the months and years ahead. But he put it very, very succinctly. This is an example of an unregulated market where legislators are behind the pace. You have to go back 2015 before government really woke up to the idea that we could restrict the amount of time these short lettings could run. They can be restricted to 90 days, but that's still 3 months. And people can be living in places which are unsuitable, they are badly protected, there are no gas safety certificates, no carbon monoxide alarms, no electrical testing, all the sort of things you would expect to get in a holiday let or in a properly regulated piece of social housing or rented accommodation. So it does seem to me to be really quite a dangerous situation, as well as Bob's point that it's creating unfair competition against those people who are abiding by the rules and providing safe and secure accommodation. So on both those grounds, and on the issue of antisocial behaviour, which does occur in some of these occasions, I hope you will support this motion. This is a looming problem which society needs to get a grip of. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons?
I'll be very brief. There are many Airbnb houses in East Oxford, and it's a real problem for the city, and we should support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Other short-term letting agents are available. I just wanted to make clear that this isn't a motion that says that there is something automatically wrong with short-term lets, and indeed I think we would all in the city encourage people who want to let out a spare room, as was the original intention of a lot of these agencies. You know, that's a good thing, and we are supportive of their right to do so. But I think that colleagues have said very clearly about some of the incredibly antisocial uses that have been, some of these premises have been used for, including pop-up brothels and all-night party houses, and some of these places are permanently in that sort of situation. It is a real problem. We do need to get help in terms of regulating this.
Thank you. Anybody else wishes to speak? Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Could I ask that the officers look at other European cities which have the same problem? In Berlin, for instance, you can't let out on this basis for more than 6 weeks of the year. They seem to manage that by local regulations, and that's the case with several European cities. They have sorted the problem out, and there's much less of the investment just at a let out for B&Bs, which is actually very bad for our rental market generally.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Right, can we perhaps have some summing up? Councillor Price?
Yes, thank you everyone for your contributions. I think that it is clear that we all recognise there are abuses here which need to be regulated. As Liz quite rightly says, that these issues have been recognised elsewhere and have been regulated successfully. And as Susan points out, we're not seeking to stop people letting rooms, but to make certain when they are, that they don't cause problems either for those letting them or for those living nearby, or indeed for the
people in the houses themselves. What's very important, I think, about this is that we work in conjunction with other local authorities, and we see it as a national issue where there is a consensus around this through the LGA and other local authorities. And it's nice to get such support on my final contribution to Council.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Price. Let's hope that Council is going to support you as a sort of triumphant final motion. Those in support of the motion, please. There we are, you've got it. Thank you, Jennifer. Now, two important things to say at this point. One is that, as Councillor Price mentioned earlier, there's a sort of possibility of, I believe there's some bottles of something coloured over the way in the Lord Mayor's Parlour, and it would be very nice if anyone would like to come in and sample some of it. That would be appreciated. It'd be nice to see you all. Please do. And Councillor Abbasi would like to say a few words, as it is his last council as well.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillors, officers, it has been a great pleasure to serve the council since 2002, and I enjoyed myself really, and it was a great honor to serve the people of Oxford, and I enjoyed my period very well, and I hope that, I don't know whether you're going to miss me or not, but I'm going to miss you a lot. And once again, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank everybody for, I think, a very good final council meeting of the council year. Thank you all. I think things have gone pretty well in council this year, and I wish everybody very much success, whether they're in or out of council next year. Thank you.